Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to Tony the Technician channel, and today we're going to be going into a cold air intake for the 2020 Kia Telluride, that being the K&N 77-5300 Kilo Sierra, and it's going to include the piping, the box, and the filter. It's not just a cold air intake filter. They do have drop-in filters. That's not considered a cold air intake. We're not going to get too much into the background or benefits or non-benefits of cold air intakes. Let's just put it this way. A lot of modern vehicles today, the design on them, a lot of engineering has been put into them. Most vehicles today actually have more of a cold air intake on them than what you would purchase off of Amazon or eBay. A lot of those cold air intakes are not actually cold air intakes. Just because you're switching to a different pipe and a different filter does not make it a cold air intake, especially when for some reason this cheap intake puts your filter and piping right by the exhaust or over your intake manifold where all the heat is. So when getting the cold air intake, if you want to go the cold air intake route, buying one, a reputable, well-known one, that is the route to go. So that's just that, but it is still very debatable if a cold air intake is even worth it. A lot of vehicles, the parameters on the computer, some can be extremely tight. So by switching to a cold air intake, you could have a check engine light. If your parameters are a little bit more forgiving, the computer can make adjustments for the different airflow, possibly different airflow temperatures. We're not going to get into all the science. If you guys want a separate video on whether or not cold air intakes are beneficial or not, go ahead, drop a comment down below. I'll make a whole video on that. The only way to really get a good cold air intake is to basically spend the money to get a kit that has actual engineering and thought behind it, and not the $50 one that you find on eBay, or to build one yourself, which is also not going to be cheap. Also keep in mind that whether or not it keeps everything within the parameters of the computer, you're really only ever going to feel results if you get it tuned after a few upgrades. Just throwing a cold air intake onto your car and going, it's basically like the placebo effect. You're going to have more airflow and hopefully cooler airflow, but you're going to hear it and think you feel it. But a majority of the time, this claims almost 13 horsepower gain at a certain RPM, obviously. You're not gonna feel that in the seat of your pants. 20 foot-pounds of torque, not really gonna feel that either. Now, I already have the Borla exhaust. I have the intake, and the Borla exhaust does not set off any DTCs or check engine light. It's good. And if you have the K&N, it's also good. It's not gonna set it off. But I have yet to see somebody have the Borla and the K&N cold air intake. I want to see if it will set off any check engine lights or anything, set any codes. So we're going to install this. First, I'm just gonna quickly run through everything that is included in the box. It does not come assembled. You have to assemble it and then you have to install it. The kit is by far more than I've ever spent on an intake before. I usually custom build my own like I did on the Camaro, but that wasn't cheap either. It's really hard for me to spend that amount of money on an intake. But the good thing is it still uses the inlet portion of the stock intake, so we're still getting cold air from in front of the engine, not next to the engine. Now, no matter what intake you go with, also keep in mind all that airflow has to come through your engine base. So no matter where your inlet is, yes, you want the coldest air there possible. Also keep in mind it's going to be heating up as it's traveling through and being drawn into the engine. But that's better than hot air being drawn in already and getting hotter as it passes through. So I'll make a whole nother video on that if you guys would like. So let's go ahead and get into the contents of this K&N cold air intake for the 2020 Kia Telluride, and we'll go ahead and get it installed. We're at the shop now, so we're just gonna go ahead and get this done. First, we're gonna quickly go over the tools that you'll need. So you'll need a flat blade screwdriver, a ratchet, extension, 10mm socket, 12mm socket, pliers, cutters, a 4mm Allen key, 9/16 wrench, and 3/4 inch wrench. So I got all of that here. I also have a tape measure and a cordless ratchet in order to get all of this done. So as long as you have those tools, you can do it yourself. This is not something that you need to pay somebody to do. It's really not that difficult, and I'll walk you through the process. The first portion of the assembly of the actual box is going to be this mounting point, which has to be mounted onto the framing, and this is basically going to hold the box in place. And you're going to need a lock washer, and the only supplied 10mm hex bolt. Everything else is going to be Allen key. Not anything too ridiculous, just snug it up. All right, next step is to actually cut the provided seal to these lengths. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure these out and go ahead and cut them. Then you'll go ahead and attach them to the box everywhere that it states. You will have overhang here for when the top portion of the box goes on. So that's it. Now we can go ahead and start disassembling the stock intake and get this one installed. The first step here is going to be removing these two vent lines. So you have one here, one lower over here. So you're just going to need a pair of pliers for the clamp here and here. Remove that off of the intake hose. Slide them back, and then once you've done that, you can slide them off. Be careful not to break these because they are plastic. And then your two hose clamps, you're gonna wanna loosen. All right, so kind of give them a twist and a pull. That guy comes off. That guy comes off. And then that portion of the intake is out. Next up, you actually have your inlet for your air, which is right here. You're gonna have to remove these two little clips. So just a flat blade screwdriver, pop those out. And then that guy just slides right out of there. Once you've done so, you now have access to the battery, which they want you to disconnect. I'm gonna try and do so without disconnecting the battery, because you just need to slide it forward enough to get this box out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and remove the hold down right here, and then we'll move forward. We've released the battery and we've scooted it forward. Now you're going to have two bolts down here that you're going to have to remove, one right here and one right here. Simply remove those, do not lose those because you will be reusing them. We went ahead and removed the two bolts right there, real easy. And then the box is just kind of sitting in here now. So there is that plug that we installed on the new one. It's going to be in the back right corner. It's kind of holding it in place in the back. So you're just gonna kind of lift, and that's what I was talking about. That is it as far as your stock air cleaner. The next step is installation. So first step is going to be your hump coupler, or your intake hose coupler. Slide it on the throttle body, and you want to make sure you position this clamp right here to where you can actually access it. So I'm gonna have it something like this, and then you're gonna go ahead and secure it, probably something like that, in place so I can access that if I ever need to remove it. I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that down, and that is going to be an 8mm or a flathead screwdriver. Doesn't really matter. Make sure it's on there all the way, seated, and the clamp is around the actual hose. All right, that's not going anywhere. Now we can install our air cleaner box. So just remember, little nipple that you put on here. That's going to go in the back right corner. And then your mount is going to be here and on the inside box. So just kind of set that down in there. And that's it in place. And now we're going to take our 2 bolts that we removed from the front earlier, and we're going to reinstall those. Now we can go ahead and place our battery back in its original location. I didn't need to disconnect the battery because I didn't want to have to reset everything. So we'll go ahead and reinstall our battery hold down. All right, battery hold down's in place. Now we can move on to the next step. Now we're gonna go ahead and install the intake pipe. You gotta put your fittings in here. You're going to be provided a couple fittings, but they're plastic, so I went ahead and got the Earls anodized ones, and we're just gonna go ahead and install it, slide it on here, and then all you're gonna do is come in here and tighten your clamp on this side, and then you can install your filter. So I'm gonna go ahead and reinstall this hose onto the fitting and this hose on the smaller fitting on the other side, and then we'll tighten down the clamp and get the filter installed. We got the pipe installed and all clamped down. We got the lines on, the clamps on the lines, both here and here. We got the filter on, and all of the clamps are tightened down. The lines aren't kinked or anything like that. They're all secure. The filter is a little close to this portion of the box. The box, it doesn't fit in the box the best. It is nice and sturdy now, but next up we just need to install this guy, which will sit here and kind of push in right there, and then we'll get the top portion of the box on. We'll be using the Allen head button head bolts. It's a flat washer, then the lock washer, and then the button head. Install those for it, and then it'll be all done, and then we can do a sound test on it. The lid's on. Now we'll just go ahead, snug up all of the bolts on top, and that's it as far as installing the K&N cold air intake on the 2020 or 2021 Kia Telluride. Same thing for the Palisade. So real simple installation. Probably, without doing a video, this would probably take about 30 minutes or so, maybe 45 minutes cutting the seal and all of that. So we'll go ahead and finish this up, and we'll do the sound clip. Okay, we're gonna do a real quick sound clip of before the intake is installed. I'm not sure you'll hear much of anything except for maybe the exhaust, but we'll also do a sound clip after the intake is installed so we can tell if there's a difference. I'm sure I might be able to tell in person, but on camera it might be very slight. Alrighty, YouTubers, so that's it as far as the intake installation on the 2020 or 2021 Kia Telluride or Palisade. That's the K&N cold air intake. So my thoughts on it: I think it's a good design. Some actual thought has been put into it. There are pros and cons to it as far as the build quality and everything I'm gonna quickly go over. So the pricing, for one, is way too high, but that's just the way it is for all of the K&N intakes and other name brand cold air intakes. They're just much higher priced, but at least you're not getting something that puts the filter over the exhaust or something like that. Other than that, the filter kind of fits in there a little snug. I wish they could have changed the angle on the pipe to allow a little bit more room around the filter. Overall, that's not a big deal. Just make sure that when you put it in there, you tighten it down to where it's not rubbing on any metal or anything like that. And then that, there's the 2 fittings that are plastic, garbage. And there's the 2 bungs in the pipe. So they're both 1/4" MPT thread, and the fittings, one is going to be a 3/8, one's going to be a 5/8. For one, the 3/8 one is fine. The 5/8, you should never have a 1/4" MPT to 5/8. That's just not common. It is very hard to find. So if it breaks, you're not going to be able to run to your local parts store and pick one up. That's why I went with the aluminum Earl's fittings and just got done with it, and I'm not going to deal with that because the plastic ones are very fragile. They break, they crack over time, they become brittle. I just don't want to deal with that. So I went ahead and just got rid of that issue. But I think for $400, they could have invested in, instead of using a 1/4" bung for that fitting, they could have stepped up to a 1/2" bung or something a little bit larger to where you can actually find that fitting if it ever breaks. Other than that, it's a good intake. You can definitely tell the responsiveness of the vehicle is better. My exhaust also sounds a little bit more throaty, which is nice. So you're not gonna feel a whole lot of more power or anything like that. It's just not gonna happen, but you may feel better responsiveness or throttle responsiveness. So keep that in mind. But overall, if you guys want to hear my personal thoughts on cold air intakes, a majority of the time they're a waste of money or time, but in certain situations, and if you're willing to put in the time and effort and money, they can be a performance gain, but that's just something to keep in mind. I'll make a separate video on that if you guys are interested. Other than that, $400, a little pricey. Other than that, I think it's a good intake. I'm going to enjoy it. It's been 30 miles now, and I haven't got a check engine light, and I got the boiler exhaust and the intake on it. No issues yet so far. If there is, I will update you guys down in the comments as well as the description. If you guys enjoyed, please make sure to hit that thumbs up. Leave a comment down below if I forgot to mention anything, and I really hope this helped you in deciding whether or not you want one, as well as if you did get one, you can save yourself some money and do the installation yourself and not have to pay somebody else to do it. And also, if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.